bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with the HockeyRaiders.com, Hockey Raiders podcast, Hockey Raiders audio, video, YouTube channel, wherever you might be watching or listening to this. We've got our regular cast of characters with us. We've got everybody in this week, which is awesome. We've got Julian Mongillo. Julian, how are you?
I'm good. I'm doing good. A little bit busy this time, but things are ramping up with hockey just around the corner, so I'm happy.
Yeah, we're not that far away. It doesn't feel like it ended that long ago, but it's coming around the corner already. Swane is with us. Brian, how are you?
Doing good. Excited to be with the whole crew here again.
Yeah, it'll be nice to have everybody weighing in. And back with us this week. You missed last week, but he's here again. Colton Pankiw's here. How are you, Colton?
Good. Yeah, like you guys said, it's good to be back with everyone. It feels like it's been a long time since we've done this, so excited to get going.
Yeah, so what we did, and we'll kind of explain to Colton because he wasn't here last week, and to everybody who might be watching this video but didn't watch last week's. Last week we talked about good value contracts, great value contracts, just value contracts for the Edmonton Oilers. So who are the players on the team who have the best contracts, the best deals, are really worth their weight in gold? So this week we're going to talk about bad value contracts. So players on this team that either make too much money or are signed for too long or aren't producing at a level that maybe they should. Contributing like compared to their dollar value, right? So that's what we'll do. So we'll break it up into like not so good, so that we won't be too hard on anybody. Not so good, we'll then do bad, and then we'll do terrible. So whether you call them that or not doesn't really matter, but that's kind of the frame of what we're working with. So we'll let Julian go first, and basically in this category we're going to talk about the not so good ones. So they might not be terrible. They might not be really bad, but they're not very good. They don't fit into the value category. They're not helping the Oilers by any means. In fact, in most situations, it's probably not a great contract for the Oilers to have in the books, but it's not so bad that we're like, oh my gosh, got to get rid of this guy. Who is in the category for you, Julian, of not so good value contracts?
I'll start off with Mike Smith here. Not that I don't think he's good or, the Oilers obviously have to have a lot of trust in what he's going to be able to do this season to have success. I just don't know if it was, on a 2-year deal, if I like the term as much and with the number. I think that he has the upside to, if he could do what he did last year, then no one's going to blink an eye at that contract. But I think there is significant downfall or potential downfall if the injuries come back into play, or he just finally hits that wall of that we all hit when we get to a certain age. So that's the only concern I have with that contract. But it's just more of a nitpicking thing.
Yeah, I can't say that I hit a wall with my professional hockey career when I hit 39, but I can tell you I hit a wall when I hit 39 for like most everything. I started gaining weight like crazy. I was just lazy and old man bones and feeling achy. So I totally get that. But Mike Smith is the guy who seems to be impervious to whatever happens to 39-year-olds, 38-year-olds, 37. He's just like the clock that never really ticks, right? But I do agree with you on the 2-year deal. I actually think that even if he has a good season, we're still talking about this at the end of next year. Like everybody's going to look at the Mike Smith deal 1 year at a time and go, yeah, well, he did that, but can he do it again? Even if he has another wonderful season, I think they'll ask those same questions again. Brian, do you think Mike Smith would fit into that category of not so good contracts?
I would be hesitant at this time next year what he's going to be able to do. It's the contract amount isn't so astronomical though that I think it can be, it'll be a killer to the Oilers. But I agree with you guys. I mean, outside of Tom Brady, everyone eventually hits that wall, right? And it's coming for him. I don't know if it's going to hit him on opening night this year, or if he's going to have like another Vezina worthy season, or who knows, but it's inevitable. It's coming. And we've talked about the goalie situation in the past. If he's your starter at this time next year anyway, then this team is not where it should be in terms of trying to contend for a championship. They have not acquired or do not have the piece in goaltending that they need. to do that. So effectively, you're going to be paying him that amount to be whatever, second string, third string, cheerleader. So I in that sense, yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay, now I'm gonna ask you yes or no, Brian. And if it's a no, don't tell me who your person is. But did you have Mike Smith in this category?
I did not.
Okay, so we'll come back to you with your pick. Colton, how about you? Was he your pick for this category? And what do you think about Julian's pick of Mike Smith?
He wasn't my pick for this category, but I mean, I think it's reasonable to expect. The couple of seasons he had prior to this last one, he wasn't very good. So I think if he goes back to that, which I think is probably likely given his age, then yeah, it's not a very good deal. I wasn't a very big fan of it.
Okay, Brian, who is your selection? So if Mike Smith is not your pick, who is your pick?
It's kind of in the same spirit, but looking further down the road, the Zack Hyman and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins deals. I think they're both going to be key contributors. They both earned the contracts they've been given, not to take anything away from them in that respect. But when you get to there's been a lot said. We've spent so much time on this too, talking about how with the style of game that Hyman plays, how's he going to be able to hold up? And I mean, Julian knows this very well. He's filled this in on his time with the Leafs. This guy, it might catch up with him by the time he's 34, 35, towards the end of his contract. Nuge, who's going to be getting up there in the mid 30 range too, making over 5 million a year. So those two guys, but then again, 5 million might not be anything remotely close to what 5 million is today in terms of the effect it has against the cap. So I know I'm not really making compelling cases for these guys, but I mean, in terms of like contracts that I might be a little bit hesitant about, it's not so much today, but it's the longer term.
So you said both Zack Hyman and Nugent-Hopkins. If you had to pick one between the two, who's the one you're going with?
I think I probably Hyman, just because he's more of an unknown to me, as someone who follows the others. I think with Nugent's style of play and how cerebral he is, I still think he can be a very effective player. I don't think his injuries are necessarily going to catch up with him. I think he's going to be a healthy player at 35. I think he's going to be a smart player at 35. I think he can contribute. Hyman is just more of an unknown.
Now, Julian, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was he your sleeper last week? Where Hyman, we asked at the end of it, like,
I probably got roasted for that one, but I hear everything that Brian's saying, and I see his point of view. I just think that the key word that he said that I want to hit on is that 5 million now might not be what 5 million is going to be down the road. I think that's the big thing. And seeing what free agents got paid this year, I don't think I know the term is something totally different, but the value in order to get that number down in increasing the term, I don't think it's technically a bad value. I think you're going to get a lot from him in terms of the playoffs, in terms of, just character and everything in the room and everything, even on the special teams. And I think he can contribute in a lot of different ways in his versatility. So I think maybe over the term, it might be a little bit troublesome at that number, but in order for him to to have him at that number, I don't think it's as bad.
And I think you said something to the effect of he's going to give you so much in the first 4 years or so that 7 years isn't really what matters that much, right? Like, I guess if you break it up that way, it's a different case altogether. Colton, what do you think of the Zack Hyman selection there?
Yeah, I mean, I was one, even when we were talking before they had signed him, I was kind of leery of going too long with the term, but I've kind of changed on that. Just like you guys said, I think it's kind of a win now mode. So worry about the later years later. I think the cap hit for what he is right now as a player is quite reasonable.
Who's your selection for this round then, Colton?
I don't know if you guys will necessarily agree with it, but I was going to go with Cody Ceci just based off, I know he had a good season in Pittsburgh last year, but from everything you hear online, granted, I haven't watched him play a ton, so I hope he proves me wrong, but just the 4-year term I thought seemed a little questionable for a guy that doesn't necessarily have the greatest track record. So if he has a great season this year, then I'll definitely turn around on that. But until he does, I'm a little skeptical on that one.
Julian, what's your thought on that selection?
That's another one that I'm not sure. I understand it as well. I think there's a lot of hesitancy with you guys because of the unknowns. You don't know what kind of guy you're going to get at the value. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad value, considering that a lot of these top 4 D men these days are getting paid north of 4.5. And if he can bring a stabilizing defensive presence, then at $3.5 million for the next 4 years, it's going to be a great value. I think he showed glimpses of it in Toronto, and then he took a big step forward in Pittsburgh. So if you can get that at $3.5 million, you're seeing guys like Jake McCabe go. I think he signed with the Chicago for even over $4 million or something like that. So I don't think that paying a top four paired defenseman $3.5 million is going to be the worst contract that you're going to have on your team, or a bad contract on your team.
I should say quick too, if he does slide into a top 4 role and plays well, then obviously I think it's a good signing for that deal. I just think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. I think a lot of fans are kind of expecting him to, or hoping that he can perform kind of how Adam Larson did, not necessarily the same player.
Yeah, he has big shoes to fill for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one for sure. Like if you're looking at Cody Ceci as the next Adam Larson, you're probably going to be disappointed. Now, I don't know enough about Cody Ceci, and that's why I asked Julian first, because you did watch him in Toronto a little bit. But there was a big difference in the responses to how he played in Pittsburgh last year versus how he played in Ottawa and Toronto. And you, having seen him as a fan of the Maple Leafs, probably had a little more insight there. But yeah, if Cody Ceci's turned his game around and sort of reinvented himself as a player again, and he is a stabilizing presence on defense, maybe not as physical as Larson, maybe not as gritty as Larson, but he is like stable in that role, then it's probably fine. In fact, it could turn out to be a pretty good deal if he is turned around and he is a good player and he's solid and he can be in that role. Brian, what do you think about Ceci in that not so good selection there?
You guys all made valid points. I haven't seen enough to really have a strongly formed opinion on him either. I would ask Julian, though, I'm curious, like when he was in Toronto, and I know that he really got roasted that season in that market for the way he played, and it just seems to have all turned around for him in Pittsburgh. I think a guy like that, it's the position that he's put in where he's not asked to do more than he's capable of. And if the role he's given on the Oilers is where he can succeed, and if that's being the second pairing defenseman, then I think that's where you get the value. Like if he is that guy at $3.5 million, that is good. But yeah, I'm just for Julian, like what was he asked to do? What was his responsibility with the Leafs? Were they asking of more of him than he was capable of?
I think so. I mean, he was playing with Riley on the top pair. Like you're logging big minutes, heavy minutes, and they're hard minutes. So, he was even making 4.5, which is even more. So of course the fans are going to get on him more, when you're making a bigger dollar value. But when you get him at $3.5 million, he can be a quiet guy. Like if you don't notice him, he's doing his job. That's kind of like the way Larson went about his business, which is if you can get that from him, $3.5 million I'm leaning to the side of that's a good value to me. Anywhere if over 3.5, then we're starting to get to where maybe that's a little bit too much, especially if the term was what it was. But I think at 3.5, the way you're seeing all these other defensemen in the league that are playing top 4 minutes getting paid, I don't think it would turn out to you, even if he ended up being a top 6 or a bottom 6 pair defenseman. Like 3.5 is not the worst you can do. You can hide that. You can use him on the penalty kill and limit his minutes to roles where he could, at least help your team, and hide that contract more where, David Savard, like I said, Jake McCabe, they're all making over $4 million, and they're even older than what Ceci is.
All right, for the last entry into the not so good category, and I'm not sure if you guys will have this person in a higher category than I put him. I have Zack Kassian. He's got 3 years left, $3.2 million. The reason I put him in the not so good category and not maybe in a worse category is because he could really play well. I mean, he could be one of those guys that I understand why the Oilers didn't want to move him. I understand why they didn't expose him to Seattle. I understand why they didn't trade him. But he doesn't always give you what you hope he'll give you and why you keep him around. He's not necessarily a consistent scorer. I have a feeling they're going to try him maybe in a top 6, if not a top line role, because he's had some chemistry in the past with McDavid. I hate that idea. I don't necessarily think Zack Kassian's played well enough to even be a regular in your lineup. But when he plays the way that Zack Kassian can play, I think he's a pretty good value at 3.2. I'm just a little concerned about he's got the fact that there's 3 years left. That contract was signed when he had a fantastic season, and he hasn't had it again since. He hasn't even been close to that kind of player consistently. But when he turns it on, he's pretty good. So I didn't rate him worse because I think, you know what, when he plays Zack Kassian hockey and he's effective, he's really effective. He's exactly what you want on your team when you're trying to get a later berth into the playoffs and keep fighting. You need a guy like Zack Kassian, but more often than not, he doesn't give it to you. Colton, I'll start with you. What's your thought on Zack Kassian in that spot?
I agree that if he is able to kind of get back to the player he has shown at times in Edmonton, then it's a fair deal. It's just the inconsistencies with me for him. I think all last season and at different times throughout his tenure with the Oilers too, he can just go on spurts where you really don't notice him for multiple games at all, and he just doesn't seem to get engaged. So it depends which player shows up for me. I think I might have him in a higher category right now, but if he's able to jump into a top 6 role and perform like he has at times in the past, then I really don't have an issue with it. But again, with all his consistencies, I'm pretty unsure about that one right now.
Brian, what about you? Are you on the Zack Kassian's effective train, or are you on the Zack Kassian hasn't showed me that this is a good deal?
I don't think it's a good deal. I'm with you. I actually had him as my next guy up on this list. So, and I look too at this after all of the moves the Oilers have made this year and the depth they've added it forward. Like, where does he fit in? Like, this is a guy that I could see being healthy scratched, far more often than not. And if you're paying $3+ million for that, then that's a bad contract. Anytime you're paying anybody, anything remotely over even say $1.5 million to sit in the press box, that's a bad contract. Well, he makes more than that. And I just don't know where he fits in this lineup. And if he gets a shot to play with McDavid, I'm with you. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's going to click like it did in the past. Maybe it will, but yeah, like, I don't know. What do you guys think? Where is he fit in this lineup?
Well, if you've got him in the next category up, the thing that worries me if they play him top is that Puljujarvi or Hyman isn't in that spot, and that's what I want to see that top line look like at first. Julian, did you have Kassian in a higher category? Did you rank him even worse? Or
yeah, I had him ranked where in the next level up from this as the next bad contract. So we're right where Brian had him. I'm not sure where he fits in the lineup. I think he's probably a third line player. I don't know if anybody emerges to take that spot away and outplays him for it. I think it's a possibility that happens. And if that happens, then that $3.5 million contract's not going to look too good. Especially if he's on the fourth line or even scratched, like Brian said. So I don't like the deal. I don't mind the player, but it was one of those deals. I think Chiarelli, that was one of the Chiarelli ones, right? Was Chiarelli responsible? Yeah, I think so, right? Yeah. So
unless was it Holland's like first? No, it was Chiarelli, right?
Was it Holland?
It might have been Holland's first deal, first real long-term signing.
Okay, well, either way, I don't think it was a wise decision. I don't like the term on it. I don't like the age and where he's at in his career, and to pay. I said this a long time ago, to pay a guy who's going to play, even if he has a role on your team, to be a physical presence on, in the playoffs or whatnot, that you don't pay him $3.5 million to do that. I don't think. I think you can find guys that are cheaper to do that job. The Leafs have seen guys come in and out, Wayne Simmons, guys like that. You can find them. They're out there in the free agent market. They're out there via trade. You can get them for cheaper. And I just don't like the value.
So Colton, you said you might have had him in a higher category. Did you actually have him in the second category?
Yeah, I had him in the second one as well.
So do you think that there's any chance that he works his way out of that? He's got 3 years left on this deal, $3.2 million. If he has a really decent season, I don't know what a decent season for Kassian looks like, 17, 18 goals. But if he has that season and he does do the Zack Kassian thing, which is sometimes really endear himself to the fans, and everybody really loves Zack Kassian when he's playing well, can he work himself out of these categories?
I mean, he's shown in the past, he has the skill level, and he brings all these intangibles to the Oilers that if he brings that on a consistent basis, I'd say that I had no problem paying him that. It's just, I don't see it happening. He's really struggled with consistency since getting there. And I think he's about 30 years old. So I don't see that changing at this point.
Brian, are you with Colton on that one? Is he the kind of guy that at this point probably can't turn it around? Or is he in a situation where, look, if he shows up ready to go, he's in good shape, he wants to play and contribute, that he could be a difference maker?
Yeah, how's the saying go about the tiger showing you his stripes or whatever that is? I don't know. I don't have the wisdom here, but if any, you know what I mean? It's I think we know who this guy is at this point in time. The one thing that I will throw out there is that he's a guy that, and I think we probably talked about this in the past, he really gets engaged. He thrives off playing in front of fans, whether that's hostility or fans that are on his side. He seems to thrive in that. And obviously he's struggled completely since they've been playing in empty arenas. All of last season was entirely a write-off, I would say, and in the playoffs in the bubble. He wasn't particularly great either. So I don't know. Do we see more of like the 2018, 2019 Kassian? Now that he gets to play back in front of a packed house again? Man, that might be something just to consider. He just seems there are players like that. And maybe he's one of them. And maybe he actually does click back in and is a 15, 20 goal scorer for you again this year.
So I had him in my not so good. And am I right? Julian, Brian, and Colton, you all had him in the next category up, the bad contract category. Is that true? Okay. Yeah. Well, then I guess I'm the only one that's going to pick a different player for the bad category here. And one of the reasons I put Zack Kassian in the lower tier, the not so good and not the bad, is because in my bad category, I have Mikko Koskinen. I don't like that contract at all. I never liked that contract from the very moment it was signed. It was one of those deals. The others tend to do this sometimes. Zack Kassian's deal, I kind of got. I thought it was an overpayment because you could see this was like the only really good season that he had. And it was kind of like, okay, well, you're rewarding this guy for one really, really good season. And you think he could maybe do this, but there was never evidence or proof that he could on a repeated level. The Koskinen contract came out of nowhere. It was one of those deals where it just got signed at a weird time for a weird amount of money. There was no evidence or proof that he was going to be able to live up to that contract ever, and he hasn't. He's been okay. His stats are decent compared to an average, maybe sort of semi-starter backup in another team, but that's all Koskinen is at this point, and you're kind of paying him like a starter, and we've been saying that since they signed that contract, that he's never once proved that he can legitimately be a starter in the NHL. That's why I have him in my bad category contract instead of my not so good. Julian, what is your thought on Mikko Koskinen? Did you have him on this board at all?
Yeah, Koskinen was going to land on my worst contract for the team. I know it's only 1 year left, and you deal with it for 1 year, and then you don't have to see his name pop up on the Oilers feed again. But like you hit it on the head already. Just the value's not there. He hasn't produced like what $4.5 million goaltenders are supposed to produce. Like you see guys. Your Shesterkin got north of that, I think. So that's one of the Chiarelli's. That one I think is Chiarelli all on that one, that contract. So that one we can blame on him. So it was one of the older ones that Holland had to grandfather in, and it's not good enough. It's just not a good contract. Thank God it's only on the books for one more year, so we don't have to deal with it moving forward. I just don't like what he's been able to show. He's just too inconsistent, and it's definitely a spot that the Oilers are going to need to use that cap space to go and address that role moving forward after he's gone.
Brian, was Koskinen in your worst category, or was he not on your board at all?
He was whatever the absolute worst, terrible, most dreadful a nightmare contract is, that's the one that he is. So you've got me intrigued now, because I'm thinking like, who could you possibly have at number one if it's not Mikko Koskinen? So
I can tell you,
Julius, I have an idea.
Yeah, I think I got an idea too. So I have nothing to add to that. I like Mikko Koskinen. He seems like a good teammate, a good dude. He's just getting paid way more than he should. So
I would like Mikko Koskinen too if he was 1.5 million cheaper.
Yeah. So I got nothing to pile on. We've talked about this to death about that deal.
Cool. And where did you have Koskinen, or did you?
Yeah, I had the same as these guys. Like you said, the deal just really came out of nowhere at the time, and like you said, at the time it was weird too. I think Chiarelli was fired like days after that contract was signed. That was just very bizarre timing. But yeah, he was at my top two.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you guys guess before I tell you who my worst is. If you guys all have him in your worst, Julian,
we know Duncan Keith.
Brian, who do you think my worst is?
Duncan Keith.
Yeah, is that what you're saying?
Keith.
It's Duncan Keith. And you know what? The funny thing is, I actually like the idea of adding Duncan Keith. What I hated from the second
hated
it
the
happened,
non-retention.
Oh my God, I hated that. I don't understand it. I don't buy that. Like Holland said in his press conference, he's like, well, you can't just like hold every GM over the fire. You can't just force. You can. You absolutely can. And they do it to each other all the time, right? Like Chicago did it to Vegas. Like they did it with Marc-Andre Fleury. They gave nothing for a Vezina trophy winning goalie. Nothing. They gave absolutely. Yet Ken Holland like doesn't get them to retain anything. Like it was crazy to me. I just didn't understand it. I wrote multiple articles going, okay, great. Add Duncan Keith. This is going to be a good ad. He's a good leader. He's got veteran presence. I think he's a better hockey player than everybody in Chicago is saying he is. But they're going to retain. They got to retain some salary. I'm guessing 1.5, 2 million. How much are they retaining? Nothing. They retained absolutely nothing. And they gave up Caleb Jones. And like they just, I don't mind that Caleb Jones is gone, but like you didn't have to give up Caleb Jones and have them retain nothing. Like I hate the contract. And it absolutely is a total stinker. And it's the thing on the Oilers books on Cap Friendly that just stands out at you. It's like you've got now Duncan Keith could come in and be fantastic. I still don't think he's worth 5 point whatever million. Like even at his highest level of what he can play at his age, I don't think he's going to live up to that contract. And I think he's going to get ragged on all season for it. Like I just don't see how Duncan Keith, even at his best at this age, is going to give you the value. People will still say, well, they could have retained something, 500,000, $1 million. Like, I don't know. Am I way off? Like you guys didn't have, so if you guys didn't have Duncan Keith on your board at all, what are you guys thinking? Colton, what's your thoughts? How come you didn't put, if I have him worst, how come you didn't put him on your board at all? Not that you have bad answers. I'm just wondering, like, how did he not register for you?
I just think, I agree with everything you're saying. First off, even if he does play up to his cap hit, it still shouldn't be that. I think there's no excuse for it not being lower. I just went with simply over Ceci, just more of a proven player at this point. I know you hear in Chicago that he slowed down and everything, but he's still playing really heavy minutes there and given tough matchups. I think in Edmonton, when he can be a bit more sheltered, I have a bit more confidence in him at this point. And just having a couple less years on the deal too, was what did that for me.
Yeah, I suppose the term is a big deal. You know what, to be totally honest with you, if Duncan Keith had come in at Oscar Klefbom's number, I'd be totally fine. Like, had he been a direct replacement for Oscar Klefbom at that same cap hit, I wouldn't have anything to say.
The only reason I have him as a worse, or I didn't have him on my list, was because Koskinen was by far worse. And you can't who to me, Duncan Keith is more usable than Koskinen at his number. That's the only reason why I agree. It's a bad value. They had the leverage. They should have used that to their advantage and got some retention on it. Was a miss again by Holland on that one. And I just think that everything he can provide is more for that number than what Koskinen is able to provide at his number, especially compared to what else is around, like other people are being paid for around the league. And you know what you're getting at a 3-time Stanley Cup champion out of Duncan Keith, right? So I just think that has, some hold or some sort of value to it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I agree. It has value. I just don't like the value that they placed on it. That's all. Brian, what did you think? Like Holland's comments about why they added Keith, why he paid full price for Keith, why he went after the player when he was made available. Because Holland said as soon as he heard he was available, he wanted him. It wasn't one of those things where he even hesitated remotely. What do you think about my putting Duncan Keith in this spot?
If we're talking about the worst negotiated trade of the year, then they would be number one. But as far as like just the contract, I don't know. I still, it's not a great contract. I definitely considered it. But I just, for one thing, I agree with Colton. The term is one reason that I didn't include it. And the other thing, I just think I've really come around on this in the last, whatever it is, 6-7 weeks now since the deal, that I think he's going to provide. There's that intangible stuff, that winning experience. I love the idea that guys like the young guys, well, even guys that are about to step into, a guy like Nurse, who's really stepped into that next level. I think Nurse can be like a Duncan Keith level player in his prime, and to get to learn from him, be around him, the young guys like Bouchard. I like that. And I like having the championship experience. But yeah, it's a lot of money. And if he's, I don't know, the thing too, where I could agree with you, Jim, is like when you get into that age range, we were just talking about it with Mike Smith. I think Duncan Keith is 38 now. Like he could still be a very good player. Like we're banking on him to be the second pairing, play second pairing minutes. And if he's not doing that, then they're way overpaying. So that's the first, I think, qualifier you have to put in this, is he still has to be able to maintain a level to play at that. And he's like Mike Smith he's the guy that's taking very good care of himself, but Father Time catches up with all of us eventually, and it's going to come for him this season, next season, the year after it too.
Yeah, and I want to say again, let me make very clear. I like Duncan Keith. I like the addition of Duncan Keith. I think he could play in 17 minutes a night, a pretty effective role for the Oilers. Now, do I think he could do it for all 2 years? I don't know. And he's not retiring. For all these people that are saying, "Oh, well, Duncan Keith can retire, then Chicago gets cap hit penalty and all that stuff," he's not retiring. He got a brand new agent. He's planning on making a comeback, or at least saying he's not done with hockey. He's probably going to sign another deal after this. Like, there's no way that Duncan Keith is quitting early, and the Oilers are not going to get that cap savings. So he's going to be playing. I think he's going to be a good player. He's the opposite of Tyson Barrie for me, right? We're not comparing the two level of plays, but you know how we like Tyson's Barrie contract because it's so cheap that even if he doesn't give you 100%, but he gives you what he gives you really well, you're going to look at that and go, it's a pretty good deal. The Duncan Keith one, he has got to play out of his mind the whole time to really not have people ragging on him. And I agree with everything you guys have said. Like, he's a leader. He's going to be good mentor for the young guys. If he's effective, he's going to be good. So I like Duncan Keith. I just, like Brian said, I hated the negotiation of that contract trade. I just didn't like it from the moment that we heard that he didn't retain any salary in Chicago. I just was like, what? How's that even possible?
So Jim, in 2023, you're predicting that Holland resigns him to a 2-year deal?
Yeah, maybe.
2 year, 1.5.
We've got Devon Shore. We've got who was the other 2-year deal? Slater Cuckoo.
Mike
Smith, right? He loves these 2-year deals. So yeah, it wouldn't shock me. But that said, I think Duncan Keith, because of his only desire to come to Edmonton, it's going to be a fraction of what is now. So like in 2 years, we're going to look at a Duncan Keith deal and go, well, that's a pretty good deal. We're just not saying that now because he paid full price for this guy on what he was. Like based on, and I love what Duncan Keith was, but I don't know. I didn't watch him enough in Chicago to know if he can still do that. I don't think he can. And from everything I've heard people say, he can't, but he should be decent. So Julian, you mentioned something, then I'll ask this question to close the show. You said that Duncan Keith wasn't in your bad because you had Mikko Koskinen, or it wasn't in your worst because Mikko Koskinen was so much worse, but it sounded like had you been able to squeeze in an in-betweener, you would have put Duncan Keith in one of those kind of in-between categories. So who's your sleeper? Who's the guy that you thought, well, he doesn't really fit in the not so good, but he's kind of bad, but he's not bad enough to take the spot of the guy who I did pick for bad. So who's the person you didn't put in one of your three, but could have been there? Quickly
before my computer battery dies here, it's going to be Tyler Yamamoto if this contract comes in at north of $3 million. That's my sleeper. That's the condition. I think that he hasn't proven himself enough to earn a deal worth more than $3 million, especially seeing what Farabee went for. Might change the negotiation a bit. A little concerned about that. I know it'll only be a bridge deal anyway, but I need to see more from him first before they pay him more than $3 million, especially playing with Draisaitl. He should have had some sort of, upgrade from his points or at least production last season playing with a guy like him.
Well, if your computer dies, I'll tell you right now before you go off, I can't see it being more than $3 million unless it's long-term. And I don't see that happening, but I'd be shocked if it's even 2.5. I think it'll be 2.5 or less. Brian, who is in your kind of sleeper category? Who's the guy that maybe could have fit into one of the categories, but was sort of me there?
You got me? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Brian, you got me. Now, did you hear what I asked you? Okay, so who fit into your tweener category?
Yeah, I was thinking Tyler Yamamoto too, depending on what this deal looks like. I'm starting to get a little bit wary about this now. We were saying last week, this is kind of like the same thing with that Larson contract, where it's just like we assumed he was going to get signed. It was going to be, everything was all taken care of. It was going to be an ideal deal. And look what happened. The longer this drags on, the more it's just like kind of, where is this heading? So, and Holland's track record precedes himself, I guess, in terms of where I think he's done enough to give us maybe trepidation that this could be like a ridiculous deal.
I'm not worried about it at all, actually. Like, for as much as I rag on some of his negotiations, like, because he's an RFA and he has no leverage, and he's done good contracts with like Puljujärvi and stuff. I'm not at all worried about the Yamamoto deal. I think it's going to be cheap and it's going to be 2 years or whatever. Colton, who did you have as a tweener, maybe?
Jeez, that's tough. I mean, I know that it's just a cheap deal, but and it's only the term's not really there. But one guy's maybe Kyle Turris, just as a guy that really couldn't find his way into the lineup last season. Again, he's the guy that could really have a big bounce back year. I heard that he's really training hard to get back into the lineup this season. But if not, I think that's about $1.75 million or somewhere in there that you could have added a different piece that maybe would be more beneficial to the lineup than he was last year anyway. Hopefully more this season, but I'm not expecting a ton there.
Yeah, that's fair. I've heard that he's, I think you might have said, I heard that he's doing really well this offseason. They're going to try him in a wing position, and we'll see.
Won't stand for this TURRIS slander.
I was just going to say, Julian's not going to like that answer. He's a big TURRIS fan. The one guy that I would consider, and I thought about him from a not so good contract, but it's a little out of the box, was the James Neal buyout. And I don't have a solution for what you would have done instead. Like, I don't know that you could have kept James Neal on this roster, considering all that Ken Holland did to improve it. I don't know where he would have fit. It's way too much money. I hate the fact that he's a 1.9 million cap hit for the next 4 years. It's just dead money, right? And I think Neal could have been effective in some sort of role. I also think the Oilers probably could have traded him. Look at all those deals that Arizona did this summer. Like, they just took on contract after contract after contract of terrible players for nothing, right? They just said, okay, well, we'll just give us this, we'll take picks and we'll pay for the whole thing. Like, I just think you could have shipped Neal out. And so I don't love the buyout. So he was almost in my not so good category, but that buyout I wasn't a fan of. But I don't know what he would have done. And I wasn't there when Holland was trying to move him. So I have no idea if he was even remotely successful in that one. Julian, it looks like you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay. Anybody got a comment on the buyout? What do you guys think of the buyout? Was it a disaster, or was it no choice? It's actually a good deal, Colton.
I mean, I didn't really think anything of it. When you bring up Arizona, that is you have to wonder, because I mean, like you said, they took on Andrew Ladd, who's spent more time in the minors than the NHL the past few seasons, Louis Eriksson. So you do wonder if there was something that could have been done there if they had acted quicker. I think after taking on those deals, they couldn't have done much, but if they had done something previously, I mean, I don't see why not. He's definitely not worse than either of those two players. So yeah, you think maybe something could have been done there.
That he hasn't signed yet is interesting to me too, because if he's not been picked up by a team, I wonder if anybody was interested in any sort of trade. Brian, what are your thoughts on the buyout?
There was only going to be one of them between Koskinen and Neal, and I think probably the right call was made with Neal, because as you just pointed out, no one's signed him yet. I don't know if there was the market out there if they could trade him, and I think I just think between the two of them, that was probably the smarter decision to make. But yeah, that's going to hurt. That 1.9 million in 2023, 2024. That's I mean, that's not great. But here we are.
Yeah. And the reason I didn't put him in the categories because I just don't know exactly what the story was behind why it didn't get done. So I'm not sure. Well, we lost Julian. He did warn us that his computer was going to die. It looks like it did. But his timing's pretty good because we were just about to say goodbye anyway. So Brian, Colton, and Julian, who will probably be watching this later to see what we said about him after his battery died. Thank you. I appreciate it. This was another fun topic. For everybody who's watching this, I appreciate it. Check out the other videos on the YouTube page for the Hockey Raiders. Hit the like button if you're watching this on Facebook. Your notification button to get future videos, and check out some of our other stuff too. And by the way, put comments in there. If you guys want to have us talk about something for next week, because we're always looking for stuff to talk about, put a comment in there. We'll read them. We'll talk about it. Maybe we'll dissect them. Might be fun to just do a video mailbag one week and just see what people say. Colton, Brian, thank you. For everybody else, another edition of Oilers Overtime, and we will talk to you next week.